when we think about coaching and coaching youth, it's about long-term athlete development, and some of the seeds of strong relationships just take time to foster. Coaches play a pivotal part in that, and I think we're moving to a point now where it's for the coach, it's not just relationships with athletes, it's relationships with all those other people who are stakeholders. So how do you support and work well with your co-coaches? How do you lead upwards to your performance director? How do you communicate effectively and build strong relationships with parents? It's not about agreeing all the time and everyone being happy, but it's about having open, transparent connections.
Welcome to the Cutting Edge Coaching Podcast, where we believe coaches are some of the most important teachers and leaders in the world, and they deserve to be supported. I'm your host, Luke Gromer, and every week we're bringing you conversations with coaches, experts, and leaders from across sports that will give you practical ideas and strategies that you can apply in your coaching to develop high-performing teams and high-character people. Coaches, I'm excited to welcome Tom Hartley to the podcast. Tom has worked as a coach and coach developer for over 20 years, working in grassroots, academy, and performance sport. Tom's background is in coaching football and has worked at the Football Association and Arsenal FC. Currently, Tom is the coaching lead at UK Coaching, supporting the development of coaches working in performance sport, and the technical director for Swindon Town Women's Football Club. In this two-part conversation, we dive into Tom's learnings from working with coaches from across sports, commonalities of great coaching, fostering relationships, coach self-care, individual development plans, and more. As always, if you enjoy the podcast and want to grab a free PDF of notes from this episode or any episode of the podcast, go to cuttingedgecoach.com/podcast or click the link in the show details to download a free PDF of notes. Finally, if you're interested in a 5-month mentorship program, check out the link in the show details for more information and to express your interest. Spots are limited. Now to my conversation with Tom Hartley. Enjoy the show. Coaches, really excited to have Tom Hartley on the podcast with me today. Tom, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, and I'll toss it over to you and just let you share a little bit about your current role with UK Coaching, and then you can also share about what you do with Swindon Town.
Thanks, Luke. Nice to be here. So yeah, Tom Hartley. I'm the coaching lead at UK Coaching. So UK Coaching feel like the best kept secret in coaching in England at the moment. So we do lots of work in partnership with UK Sport. So we run coach development programs aimed at coaches working at the performance stage of the athlete pathway. And we also work in partnership with Sport England, trying to think about how do we support coaches from playground to podium, I suppose. And we're doing in particular lots of work at the moment around a project called the Children's Coaching Collaborative, which is a child up approach to coaching. So that's great. That keeps me busy in the daytime, and that involves working with coaches from lots of different sports, going out, spending time in situ in their environment. So I'm a football coach by trade, but recently was out in Romania with some fencing coaches, was with a basketball coach, then a swimming coach today. So variety certainly is the buzzword, or the word that reflects what I tend to find myself doing. At Swindon, so I'm the technical director for Swindon Town Women. I've been involved in women's football for years and years. Coached as the assistant manager at Oxford United, which are in the tier above Swindon. Spent many years working at Arsenal, leading the women and girls football programs there, and lots of time at the Football Association as well, spending time across boys and girls football. But yeah, my role at Swindon, technical director, what is that? I don't really know. I figure it out as I go along, I think. One day it's having conversations with the owner of the club and the chief exec and working out budget. The next day it's getting involved in some of the coaching and the detail of what happens on the pitch. So lots of variety, definitely keeps me busy in my inverted commas spare time. But I'm a Swindon Town fan, so it's lovely to kind of give a bit something back into the club, which I've grown up supporting.
That's awesome. And this actually wasn't on my question list, but my curiosity was just piqued as you were talking about your role with UK coaching and just the diverse range of experiences you get to have, the different coaches and contexts you get put into and have an opportunity to, observe, but also support. I would love it if you would maybe share some of your, key learnings from these experiences. Like you said, you're with a fencing coach one week and a basketball coach the next week. Just this diverse range of experiences. And I'd love to know, some of your key learnings and some of the commonalities you see across sport from effective coaches where, you're watching a fencing coach one week and then basketball the next week, but you're seeing these common themes emerge in effective coaching. What have you
Yeah,
noticed?
great question. And do you know what? I feel incredibly fortunate to be in the position I am, working across all these different sports and different coaching worlds. I think one of the biggest learnings that I found was, or find all the time, is context. Context is king or queen. Like you can know stuff about coaching, but every coach I work with is the expert in their own environment. So as a coach developer, it's not my job or our job to go in and fix stuff. It's to go in and be a bit of a thinking partner for the coaches that we're working with. So rather than top down leadership, it's side by side. We're alongside us with the coaches and trying to look at their environment with it, like from a point of perspective. I think there's lots of value in having the power of the outsider, and we certainly have that when we go into sports. So context is king. Um, Something else I think I've probably come to on this journey is that there's no good or bad or right or wrong, apart from all of the safeguarding and welfare pieces associated with coaching young people. If you park that for a second, when you're coaching, actually, I used to think that's a good coaching behavior or that's a bad coaching behavior. I've moved away from that now because actually, again, linking back to context, it depends on so many different things. Um, and as a coach developer, again, it's important to remain really curious about things and not trying to impose your own beliefs or your own values onto things that coaches are doing. It's just approaching every training session and every experience with an open mind. In terms of something that I've learned and commonalities, like one thing is coaches need some help. Like, and the coaches who come onto our programs are at the performance stage of the pathway. And I'd like to think that by having a coach developer is some kind of support, especially as well linking with a network of other coaches on the programs from all different types of support. Coaches start to realize I've got this problem, but I'm not the only person who's got this problem. Dealing with parents or um, managing tricky conversations with athletes, things that come up all the time. The other big thing is like every product has some kind of active ingredient. So toothpaste, as an example, fluoride is the active ingredient, regardless of the brand or the cost or where you buy it from. And in coaching, it's relationships. So no matter who you speak to at whatever level, it always comes back to relationships. And I think like the modern coach is someone who's very aware of their own behaviors when they're working with others and really intentional about wanting to work on stuff linked to relationships.
Yeah, let's go a little bit deeper into that because I love that and I like that analogy of the active ingredient. And as you're in all of these different contexts, it is the context is the king, but then also, like you said, the active ingredient that you find across all these contexts is relationships. Say more about that as far as what you believe, what the research says around how do we build and foster relationships that help our athletes grow and create an environment that, brings out the best in them and us.
I should first of all start by saying that I've stolen that analogy from someone a lot more intelligent than me. So I was fortunate to be on a call with a chap called Jean Cote the other week, who's just got so much research and knowledge and oceans of experience in coaching youth. So Jean said that, not me. So I'll accredit that to him. I guess when it comes to relationships, it's recognizing that every athlete you work with is a person first. And that sounds really like coy and clever, but it's not. Actually, just treat people on face value, and the fact that um, there's no one group here. You're working with lots of individuals. I think it's tricky for coaches to balance that kind of um, line between, even if you're coaching team sport, it's still individual coaching, and if you're coaching an individual sport, there's still lots of elements of team coaching in there. And with any good relationship or effective relationship, it takes time. It takes time to build rapport and build trust. Of course, in some worlds, and like we speak about this sometimes, we on some of our courses at UK Coaching, we bring in uh, expert negotiators from like crisis moments, and they talk about rapid rapport. And actually, yeah, there's a case for that. There's strategies to go and build rapid rapport. But when we think about coaching and coaching youth, it's about long-term athlete development, and some of the seeds of strong relationships just take time to foster. Coaches play a pivotal part in that, and I think we're moving to a point now where it's for the coach, it's not just relationships with athletes, it's relationships with all those other people who are stakeholders. So how do you support and work well with your co-coaches? How do you lead upwards to your performance director? How do you communicate effectively and build strong relationships with parents? It's not about agreeing all the time and everyone being happy, but it's about having open, transparent connections. I think as well, some of the research highlights that having that common goal or a shared purpose is a really important factor. So how are we supporting each other to move towards that? Something that I love to try and instill with teams and individuals I work with is like how are we going to help each other get better? So yeah, people first is a massive thing for me, and I think this links into being a coach developer, but also a coach. There's an element of, to use like the fancy word, like contracting. I remember when I was coaching at Oxford, I'd sat down with one of the players, and conversation was along the lines of, how would you like me to coach you? And she told me, well, just tell me what to do. And my heart sunk a little bit in that moment. I was like, I don't want to tell you what to do. I want you to figure this out for yourself. But actually, that's what that player needed at that moment in time. So maybe coaches could reflect on, if you're working with an athlete and you're able to have that kind of meta conversation, the conversation about a conversation. When we're working together, how can I help you the most? And some athletes might not know the answers to that because they've probably not been asked it before. But if you're able to have that chat and like establish some boundaries that you agree together, you could work out like, what's the type of message, when do I deliver it, how do I deliver it. So there's no ambiguity, and you're not guessing. And then as a coach, you're not treading on eggshells and you're not treading on minefields. You're able to be really on point with the way that you engage with people. So I learned this through time, and thinking about this player, she wanted to be told what to do, which was actually perfect for her in that moment in time. So I just worked out with her, well, you want to be told what to do, and in training, I'm going to wait till the end of the practice because I want you to have a little bit of self-discovery. But on match days, I'm going to tell you immediately. So if something goes wrong, it's athlete-centered to tell you in the moment, because that's what you need right now for where you are on the journey. And that links back to what I said earlier about context. Like, being athlete-centered isn't doing everything the athlete wants. It's negotiating and working around what the athlete needs.
That's good. And I like that example you shared a lot. And the recognition that even though it wasn't what you wanted to hear, as you reflected on it, you realized, okay, but that's still what they need. And ultimately, it's about them and what they need. And so I appreciate you sharing that. One of the things I was curious about her was, popped into my mind as you were talking about that was, I guess I'll throw a made up scenario to you. Let's say that you go into a coaching environment, you're doing some coach development work with a coach, and you're in this environment, and maybe the coach is reporting it to you, or it's something you observe, but the relationships in the environment between coaches and players, and even maybe players and players, uh, they're not strong, not very connected. Where should a coach start? I know you said one of the things is like it takes time, but where should a coach start if they've realized, the relationships that I have with my players or the relationships on this team aren't what I want them to be, where do they start?
Well, there would probably be a whole host of reasons to why things aren't as aligned as the coach would want them. So I would probably want to help that coach maybe reflect on any situations that have happened, or things that have played out that maybe have dialed up this feeling of misalignment, where relationships are feeling frayed. Um, and I think maybe it's on the coach to really think, well, what's my role in this? Like, I'm not the only person here responsible for creating relationships, but I'm the coach. I'm the one who perhaps maybe has to be the broker for that and ignite some kind of conversation. Um, there could be a million reasons, right? Maybe different people have different motivations for playing for that team. So something the coach could do is spend some time understanding, like, why are you here? What's value for you when you come to the practice? Um, and maybe shaping as a coach, but then with the players, like, what's our purpose? What are we trying to achieve as a group? And when you get an idea of some of the motivations and the drivers for the athletes, and you know the direction you want the team to head in, you could probably start to figure out, well, there's some athletes in this group who can play a really key role in some of those hard outcomes that we're going after. But there's some of the athletes who maybe have got different motivations for being here, who just have a different role to play. So I think being able to have that clarity and also transparency that we're all trying to achieve different stuff. Sorry, we're all trying to achieve the same thing, but our roles in trying to achieve that might be quite different. So it could be flip chart paper exercises in the meeting room. It could be some casual conversations with players on the way to the training pitch and back again. It could be dropping an open question into the WhatsApp group and seeing what comes back. I think coaches have got as many tactics as you like available there to stimulate some of the conversation, but it's really important to have the conversation, because if they're noticing that things aren't going in the right direction or no direction at all, then there's only so long that people will be able to tolerate that without going somewhere else.
Yeah, that's good. I love where you started just taking the time to reflect on, how did we get here? Or maybe what led to the misalignment that we're possibly experiencing in our environment. The other thing that I was curious to get your thoughts on, and you alluded to it earlier as well, was coach to coach relationships. I think this is probably something that, in context where there are multiple coaches with a team, probably doesn't get enough attention or thought. Often we talk about, hey, relationships with players, but those relationships between coaches are really critical as well to the health of the team and often the success of the team. Will you share your thoughts on, yeah, what makes effective or strong, positive coach to coach relationships? What's the key in there, especially if you're the head or the lead coach? How do you ensure that those relationships are something that's productive and helpful to the team?
That's a really good question. And there is a brilliant researcher based up in Toronto called Luke Martin, who is an expert around all things group dynamics. Um, and he shared with me about, well, as a head coach, you're responsible for the support and the development of your playing team, but also your coaching team. It's almost like the team behind the team. How do you get the best out of them? And it probably goes without saying that if the athletes are going to perform at their highest standard, then the coaches need to be performing at their highest standard. I think there's loads of similarities in terms of what you'd want to do with athletes, but what's our common goal? What are we trying to achieve? What are the different roles we have to play in that? And then maybe it's just being really open and clear about, well, what are the ways of working across our group? How do we want to be with each other? Um, where are the boundaries? How do we respect each other's time in the sport and time out of the sport? Um, where are our super strengths as a group? Right? And what do our super strengths look like when they're overplayed? So I'll use me as an example. So if you want some new ideas, come to me. Right? I love an idea, and I'll innovate all day long, which is great sometimes. But when I overplay that, that can be quite tedious for people who want to get stuff done and want to be solution focused. So recognizing where people's strengths are at, but understanding like where the watch outs, if I'm overplaying those strengths, it's probably really valuable in a coaching team. I think some other stuff as well that really comes to mind is, well, what's our role in practice and in competition? And maybe there's some people listening to this thinking, well, I'm the assistant manager or the co-coach in a team, and I don't really know what to do when the head coach is leading a practice. So maybe there's a real opportunity there to have clarity about what's your role. You might be working with 3 players in particular. You might be observing what's happening off the ball. You might be watching the head coach and giving them some feedback on some of their coaching behaviors. But as a coaching team, if you're able to be really clear on what are we going after in this practice today, I heard someone call it pack coaching. Like if there's 3 or 4 or 5 of us, like how do we make sure that we're seeing the game from all the different angles and points of view? Who's in it? Who's around it? Etc. Etc. How are we feeding back to each other? All conversations like that could be really, really useful. The other thing that I've seen done, which I think could be really healthy if you've got the right environment for this, is having some kind of shared development plan for your coaching team. And we hear about this for players or athletes all the time, like what's on your IDP? What are you working on this week? But actually, as a group of coaches, if we could highlight, well, maybe here are some of the things that we're collectively working on, and actually Coach Luke could help Coach Tom on this because that's your strength and actually an area as a work on for me, then we're helping each other get better, which in turn have a really positive ripple effect. So I think there's loads of things that a coaching team can do, but there's probably some really important foundations to be laid in terms of like how do we want to be with each other. The other thing that springs to mind is about like being honest. Like how can you have a dose of respectful honesty so you can be candid with each other, but know where the boundaries are in terms of like how you share feedback and when you share feedback.
Coaches, thanks for listening to this episode, and huge thanks to Tom for joining me. You can find links to connect with Tom in the show details. And don't forget to check out the show details if you'd like a copy of the free podcast notes or if you're interested in the mentorship program. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll see you next week.